Welcome back to Locked On NBA Draft. This week, we have seen the Rising Stars three-point participants, announced, and it inspired us to look at some of the best up-and-coming shooters in this draft, given that the last few best draft shooters in the draft were from this last few drafts that are in the three-point contest. We wanted to look ahead to 2022 and see who those best players as shooters are in this draft. And we're also going to recap and preview some of this week's college basketball. Let's get to it on the other side.
You are Locked On NBA Draft, your daily podcast on the NBA Draft, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On NBA Draft your first listen of the day. My name is Richard Stamen at Mavs Draft on Twitter, joined by Leif Tulin at Leif Tulin on Twitter. We got a really good episode for you today. We're going to talk about the best shooter in the draft, who we see that as our top 5 actually best shooters in the draft. So you can think of some names that'll probably be in a future three-point contest. And we're also going to talk about some of the upcoming and previous week of college basketball. Leif, what do you have for me today? How did you enjoy the last week of college basketball?
Man, I'm never going to complain about college basketball. It wasn't quite the docket of games that there was a week prior, but there were some better finishes. You saw some upsets. You saw some close games. I love college hoops. Love watching it to break down, but also just the prospects of watching a good basketball game will never disappoint me. So I'm excited to talk about a guy who we've kind of skirted around talking about for a bit. We've talked about a couple big time players, but we got one that is a tall fella who's going to go in the top 3. And I'm excited to talk about Chet Holmgren.
Hey, Locked On Chet Holmgren. We promised you this last week. We will eventually get there. First, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And with BetOnline, I'm sure there'll be plenty of bets surrounding Chet Holmgren. He's someone who I'm very excited to get into, and he might even sneak into that top 5 shooters in the class, given that he's 7 foot and can shoot very well off the dribble and catch and shoot. But let's dive into those best shooters in the draft. It was very hard for me to narrow this down from 5 to 5. I honestly am still struggling. This probably changes every day. I tweeted something out on Monday saying how, 3-point percentage isn't the only way to judge who the best shooters are in the class. Like, one of my guys is a 36% shooter. The other's a 34% shooter from 3, but I still buy them as some of the best shooters in the class. So what we're going to do is we're going to count this down from 5. We're going to have alternating lists. I'm going to go with my 5th ranked shooter in this class as of February 15th. Leif is going to do his, and we're eventually going to make our way to number 1. I'm very interested to see where some of the popular guys fall. If, you even have some of the same guys, how many guys overlap, but let's get it started. My number 5, I'm going to go with someone who his 3-point percentage isn't what it was his first 2 seasons at Davidson, but I'm a big fan of Hyunjung Lee. He is shooting 36% from 3, 79% from the line. Last year is a lot better, but the volume has changed on both of these. He was at 44% last year from 3 and 90% from the free throw line. He can shoot off movement. He can shoot spot up. He can shoot off the dribble. I'm a big fan. Who's your number 5?
My number 5 is someone we've talked about quite a bit, but I'm going to read it off as if I'm not going to give it away here. My number 5 is 6'10", shoots 39.7% from 3, has a silky smooth touch, high release, can shoot with his feet facing different directions, curl, face up, do whatever he'd like. Also happens to be number 1 on my big board. That's Jabari Smith. I think if you look at a pure shooting stroke and what he could do in the NBA, you see pick and pop becoming more and more prevalent, the 5s and 4s and 5s that space the floor. Well, he's got the athleticism to make you respect his drive as well. He'll punish that. And if you give him an opening, he'll drain the 3. Even last game against Auburn versus Arkansas, he hit 2 pull-up 3s in the dying seconds in that upset loss that made you say, wow. And that said, 40% from 3, and some of the shots he takes, I think it could even be a higher percentage in the NBA, and that's saying something because 40% is nothing to scoff at 6'10".
Yeah, Locked On Jabari Smith and us is a common thing. I mean, we're both huge fans. I have him number 2 on my board. Don't have him yet. He will make an appearance. I thought you were going to say a different 6'10 player who was my number 4 player. And this kind of wraps around my 3-point percentages and everything. I'm going with Nikola Jovic out of Serbia. He is, for the year, he's only shooting 40% from the field over in Serbia in a pro league, 33% from three this year, 77% from the line. So not a super strong, necessarily, it's not exactly the strongest numbers to support this, but if you go to his FIBA numbers, I mean, he shot 36%. Actually, the free throw percentage dipped a lot, but his shooting stroke is just so clean. It's he can shoot off the dribble, off step backs, spot up, catch and shoot, anything. He is a really fluid shooter, and I think the numbers really undersell just how good he is. Who's your number 3?
For 3, so I think it's 4 for me. But 4,
yes, I apologize.
4, I will go with. I'm torn here. I'm going to go with Benedict Mathurin. The reason I have him at 4 is I think when he shoots his ball and he just catch and shoots it, which is what he will be in the NBA, he will catch and shoot. His stroke beautiful. He's shooting 37% from 3. A lot of it is catch and shoot, but I've seen him shoot some off the dribble. I've seen him shoot off the curls, and I think that hurts his percentage. 37 is obviously a good number nonetheless, but he's 6'7", shoots the ball very well, can put it on the floor. And I think that when you couple his athleticism with his shooting, like I said with Jabari, there's going to be times where he's going to get more space due to respect of his athleticism. He also is the lead scorer on the best team in the Pac-12, and that means something to me in terms of shooting, because if you've got a higher usage rate, sometimes the shots that you're taking are not necessarily the flow of offense. He's the guy who's trying to construct something late in shot clock. And that's another lottery type talent that I think can really shoot the ball and will shoot the ball at a very high level in the NBA.
Yeah, it's funny because Mathurin gets a very bad label, I feel like, of being a 3-and-D guy, but he's so much more than that. He's so athletic. I think he can take guys off spot ups, where he pump fakes and drives. He's very good at that. And that to me is more than a 3-and-D guy. He will be in that 3-and-D mold, but he's not just strictly on offense. He's not just a shooter. He's a very good cutter, for example. Which is also very helpful as a 3-and-D guy. Like almost every elite 3-and-D player also is very good at cutting. Just for example, Corey Kispert is, although he's struggling this year, he is one of the better cutters I feel like in the league. He's already up there in that. He's been really solid. So you see things like that. You have to have other elements to your game to really, otherwise they're just going to stay right around the 3-point arc, and that's predictable. But Mathurin's a great pick. I feel upset that I didn't have him on my list. I think I focused a little bit too much outside of the top 10, but that just kind of shows how strong this year and every future year will have the same thing with how strong the shooters are in this year. My number 3, I'm going to go with, I feel like you're going to have this guy too. It's really hard not to put him up here, shooting 48.8% through 25 games. AJ Griffin, the form isn't exactly the most fluid, especially at the base, but you look at what he was doing. I think he was shooting, I'm double checking this as I'm talking, but yeah, he was shooting 50% before last week, where they played a jam-packed schedule. They played 4 games in 7 days. They had an NBA level schedule. They played 3 games. No, they played 4. Saturday to Saturday. They played 4 games. They were playing every other day. That's a lot, and his numbers dipped a little bit. We'll get into that eventually. We're going to talk about Duke, Virginia, and just Duke in general, but AJ Griffin shooting this percentage is absurd, and 3 might be underselling it. I think he's overachieving just a little bit from 3, but overall, I mean, you don't get to almost 50% this far into the season by accident.
Yeah, he's really shooting the ball. He's definitely on my list, but my number 3 is actually not shooting the ball well right now, but I can't look past his stroke. Patrick Baldwin Jr. He's only shooting 27% from 3 right now, but if you have watched him prior to playing at Milwaukee, where he's not played every game either, he's got the most fluid shot. He was often compared to Klay Thompson, and when you compare yourself to Klay Thompson, or maybe not him, you don't compare him. He has been widely compared to Klay Thompson. He didn't make that himself, is what I'm saying. Mechanically, when you're compared to Klay Thompson, that is the praise of a shooter that you can hope for. That's all you can hope for, because Klay Thompson's form, I think, may be the greatest in history. It's just so textbook, and the release and the height, I buy into it despite shooting only 27% right now. And I still have him as a top 10 pick in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree about the best form with Clay. I am a little bit skeptical of Patrick Baldwin. You know, the FIBA tape is what a lot of people point to where they say, hey, like he was really good. And his form is very good. I think he's one of the guys where the percentages undersell him. But when you have that good of form and your entire selling point is shooting, he shot 32% in FIBAs from three, 60% from line. Very small sample size. I'm not worried about the free throw percentage. But at some point, we got to start seeing results. And him not doing it in the Horizon League in very limited sample size and just in college has been a little bit alarming. I left him off just because of the percentages. There hasn't been a strong selling point on that. But if you're looking for best form in the class, it is him. I think that's objectively true. I really don't know anybody who has better form than him, except maybe the only guy who comes close for me is my number one guy who I'll get to. But I like the Patrick Baldwin addition. That was hard for me to leave him off as well. For me, my number two guy is actually someone who I see going undrafted, being a 6-year player in college and only being 6'4". But he's such a solid shooter just in any way, catch and shoot, around screens, all of it. And that's Xavier's Nate Johnson. This year, he's shooting 39% from three. Last year, 45%. Year before, 41. Year before that, 39%. And he was at Gardner-Webb for 2 of those seasons before transferring to Xavier last season. But 6'4" can really shoot. I've heard teams just fall in love with his jump shot. This from earlier in the year in non-conference play. Could see him catching on as an undrafted guy. Not necessarily I'm not sure how high that ceiling is, but he is going to latch on one way or another. So who's your number two?
Before I put my number two, one, he's a great shooter. The one you just put, that was a good get. From when I made this, I was kind of thinking of first rounders. I posted on Twitter who are the best shooters. That's what got me thinking. So I was kind of using my first rounders. I have a guy I'll put at number one, like as a second person on there. But of the first round picks, I'm going to put my number two as Ochai Agbaji. I think Ochai Agbaji, his senior year tape, his shot is so fluid. He's shooting 47% from three as the lead guy at Kansas. And I really buy into that same idea as Mathurin. When you're the lead guy on a really good team, your percentages typically dip, and he's shooting even better. He's shooting 10% better than Benedict Mathurin, who early in the season, probably people would say was the best young shooter in this class. Agbaji's older, but I think 10% is ridiculous. We've compared him to Desmond Bane, plug and play. If you can shoot, you can shoot. If you can play, you can play. That's number two on my list.
Yeah, that's actually my number one player. I'll just emphasize a little bit more statistically. Like the first year he played, he took off his red shirt middle of the season to play. Kind of came out by surprise, had some big 20-point games. Something I talked to him about at the Combine was, teams didn't know his scouting report, and he took complete advantage of that. Sophomore year, he faced some challenges, and teams knew what to expect. He shot 34% from three. And then last year and this year, he's 38% last year, 45% now up in three. And over the last 3 years, he's shooting 39% from three on 6 attempts per game. It's really good sample size. The only concern comes from the fact that he's shooting 69% on average from three. You really want to cross. If you're one of the better shooters, you shouldn't be at the worst 75%. And I know it's only 6 percentage points, but it's a pretty big gap. Ochai also brings, kind of like we talked with Mathurin, he brings other parts of the game where he's athletic. He cuts very well. He can get his head above the rim when he dunks. He's ridiculous in that end. And one last thing, and I'll let you say your number one, but his jump shot, the way he doesn't dip anything, come off screens, just such a quick, fluid shot. I buy it. I'm not too worried about the 3-point percentage. It could be a limiter, but it's not something that'll make him bust. So who's your number one? I'm very interested to see because I don't think it's someone we've said.
It is. So I've got AJ Griffin. AJ Griffin's my number one. I'll tell you why. He came into this year, and when they had their 2 big wins, AJ Griffin scored like 1 point in those 2 wins. Since then, he's gotten better, and in those games, he wasn't shooting well. He's shooting 48.8% from three. You said his shot is unconventional, and I would agree, but his balance is spectacular. It reminds me a little bit of Donovan Mitchell's free shot balance, where it's a wide base, and he's super ready to go. He loads up, and his legs are strong enough. He shoots the ball very well. Against North Carolina, he went 5 for 5. 4 for 4 to start that game. Louisville, I think he went 5 for 5 from three. Those are teams with a lot of athletes, and he's able to get his shot off quickly. And we talked about the athleticism being a help. He doesn't only shoot it from there. I buy into his shooting there. I will say my one disclaimer, because I thought it was just first round when I was making this list in my head. I think Kellen Grady of Kentucky is the best shooter in the country. If getting the Duncan Robinson mold where he gets a late second or undrafted, I think he's the best shooter on this list.
Yeah, I'm in a group chat with a bunch of Kentucky people, and I hear a lot of that name. a lot. He is someone who I liked at Davidson, and he kind of flew under the radar going to Kentucky, and he's kind of back in that area. My one honorable mention, I had to kick for Jabari Smith because at the last minute before we got on, I was like, oh crap, I forgot about this dude who can shoot at any angle, like you said. I kicked off Nigel Pack, who is someone I see undrafted. He's 6'1" at Kansas State, but shoots the absolute lights out, and he should probably follow the Frank Jackson mold where he's 6'2", 6'3", off-ball guard, but he's shooting 45% from three. He's so fast, lightning fast release. I like his game in Kansas State, but yeah, those are our top shooters of the class. I think that was a really good list. You'll find a lot of the guys are generally first-round picks. I think almost all of the guys that we listed are mostly being mocked there. Nate Johnson obviously was a little bit of an outlier, just being 24 years old, but all the other ones on our list should be first-round picks, maybe early second with Hyunjung Lee. But those were our top shooters of the draft. When we come back, we're going to recap what happened in this last week. It was a very eventful week of college basketball. But first, let me tell you about TurboTax. People think unusual circumstances mean complicated taxes, but for TurboTax Live experts, that's what makes things interesting. They have all unique lives, whether you invested in crypto for the first time this year, you own an up-and-coming small business, or you're raising rambunctious twins. TurboTax has live experts who can answer your tax questions, walk you through the whole process, or do your taxes for you from start to finish. They help you get every deduction you deserve, no matter your unique situation. And you can talk to a TurboTax Live expert through your phone or computer without leaving your house. TurboTax Live experts are here to help you however you need. And if you need an extra hand your taxes off to them, and they'll do it all for you. To TurboTax Live experts, an interesting life can mean an even greater refund. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. You do your thing, they've got your taxes into it. TurboTax Live. So, talking about the recent upcoming week of college basketball, we saw a lot happen. I think no other crazier event than the week of college basketball and than Duke versus Virginia. Virginia pulled off a crazy upset. I don't think any of us saw that one coming. AJ Griffin, we talked about him. Let's just start with that. He had 2 points, 1 of 7 shooting. It was his first bad game, I would say, since North Carolina State last month. And looking at the stats, if you take out just like he's allowed a bad game, because over the last 15, 16 games heading into this point, 17 actually to be exact, he's averaging 12 points a game, coming from the first 8 games where he averaged 4 points a game. Leif, what did you like about the Virginia game and the rest of Duke's week, in all honesty?
Well, I think Virginia has been the best program in the ACC for the past 10 years, so I wasn't stunned about this. I think that Virginia is extremely difficult to play when you're young, because you have to shoot over a pack line defense. And I think while AJ Griffin missed some shots that I think he ordinarily would make, that's bound to happen. As you said, regression to the mean. Virginia puts Reese Beekman on AJ Griffin, sometimes on Trevor Keels. He's the best defender in the ACC for my money. Mark Williams has a claim because he's a great shot blocker, but I'm a huge Reese Beekman fan. To me, this was more of a testament to how well Tony Bennett can coach. I think he won the coaching battle between Coach Bennett and Coach K. But like you said, as for the draft prospects, none of them had a particularly good game. I know Mark Williams had 16 points, but he only had 4 rebounds against a relatively undersized team. Paolo Banchero had the most disappointing game of any of the Duke prospects, in my opinion, 9 points and 9 rebounds. That sounds okay. But he was 3 of 9. He didn't shoot in the entire second half. When you're 6'10", 250, you have to find a way to get the ball against a team that's center is smaller than your power forward in Paolo. AJ Griffin, 2 points, 1 of 7 from the field. I think a bad shooting day was bound to happen. But to me, the testament was more to Virginia's defense and resiliency. That was an awesome game. I love the finish. Big shot Beekman for the win there. Basically the exact same spot as he hit it against Syracuse in the ACC tournament last year. Big win for Virginia, and I think Duke is going to rebound well from this loss down the road. I think this is going to be a good turning point for them, and I expect a more aggressive Paolo Banchero and AJ Griffin to start shooting better again.
Hey, Gloria from White Men Can't Jump said it. Sometimes when you lose, you win. Sometimes when you win, you lose. Sometimes there's some good learning moments from these losses, and hopefully that is one of them. We saw Duke go on to win their next 2 games against Clemson and Boston College. They only have 6 more games the rest of the year till March 5th. So they finally see the schedule drop off a little bit. They have 4 more games in February through 15 more, or excuse me, throughout this short month, 13 days. And then 2 games in early March, and then they hit the conference tournaments. So it'll be an interesting end to the season for them. They've already played 25 games. Paolo, like you said, I mean, I feel like his stock is finally starting to drop. He definitely was the champion of the first 2 months, I would say, throughout pretty much till January 15th. And then he started kind of slipping a little bit. Mark Williams continues to be very efficient. I mean, 84% in 3 games this last week. Could be even higher if you really expanded that sample size back to, if I really wanted to cherry pick it, back to Notre Dame through 5 games, 85%. It's just absurd. Question with him comes defense, but let's move on to a different big man who I don't think defense is really much of an issue. We teased it at the top of the episode. We're going to go full locked on Chet. Talk to me about Chet Holmgren, what you like, what you don't like. Lay it all out. Let's talk about Chet for a little bit.
I mean, where to start? Chet Holmgren has been dominant the past 2 weeks. So I know we said we're recapping this week, but I want to point out a stat line. He had 20 points, 17 rebounds, 6 assists, and 5 blocks against BYU, who talent-wise is the second best team in the WCC. And then there's this one play that I would like to talk about where not a player in the country can make this other than Chet. He takes the ball about 90 feet, not quite 94, but about 90, dribbles up the middle, makes a little shake, little hezzy shake, cuts the middle, spins back to his left hand, doesn't shoot a layup because a layup, you know, anyone can kind of flip a layup when your arms are as long as his. He shoots a full-out floater from about 5 feet with his left hand, which is his offhand, and makes it. And, like, that's amazing. That's jaw-dropping. Like I said, one player in the country can make that play. But what's crazy is that's not even what I want from him. What I want from him is what he does best. He feeds the ball unselfishly into Drew Timme. Drew Timme's extremely efficient. Chet is the anchor of their defense, and he's the unsung weapon of their offense. He's unbelievable, and he's only getting better. And I know people will be like, oh, it's WCC play. However, watch March Madness, and I think this guy is going to be the reason that this team is the favorite to win the championship.
Yeah, it's just West Coast Conference. They have at least 3 tournament teams.
Probably
I mean,
4.
I was about to say you could add a 4th in there with Santa Clara. I mean, that's a real conference. Like, yeah, the basement kind of sucks. I mean, like, with all due respect, San Diego and some of the others, fine, they're not world beaters. I get it. You get some easy games, but what prospect hasn't faced cupcakes at some point? The in-conference play since New Year's, this is January 8th till today, Chet is averaging 16 points a game, 10 rebounds a game, 1.7 assists, 1 steal, 3 blocks, and all of this on 67% shooting and just absurd 3-point volume on 3.5 attempts per game, 58% from the field with 79%. Like, we're seeing seeing the absolute true Chet Holmgren on display right now. And I don't care what conference he's in. This is he's facing some good talent. I think you're seeing some real strengths and weaknesses tested. And like you said, I mean, I clipped that play if it's the one I think it is against, you said St. Mary's, right? Yeah, that was the one. And if you want to find it, just type in Match Draft Chet. That's all you have to search. You'll see it. It's one of the latest videos I posted. It's remarkable. And then this doesn't even include how well he plays as a 2-man game as a cutter off of Drew Timme. He does so much. Chet Holmgren is the real deal. And this is coming from someone who really was skeptical to buy in. I think, do you have something you'd want to add to maybe why you should or shouldn't buy Chet? Is there anything that really stands out to you in addition to that?
I think one thing you can look at is according to Synergy, he is excellent in transition, excellent in half-court offense. He's excellent from against man defenses, which is what they face 98% of the time. In transition, excellent. Spot up, he's good. And he's 63rd percentile of spot up as a 7-1 player. He's in post ups, he's considered very, very good. 82nd percentile. Off the cut, he's excellent. Offensive rebounds, he's 99th percentile. And everyone talks about how his frame is so wiry that he may not be an effective rebounder. Well, that's dispelled right there. And you know what the greatest thing about Chet is? It's not his offense, it's his defense. And he's excellent in all those categories as well. The only thing you'd want from him that you don't get in those stats is maybe to become a better role man. But their role man is Drew Timme, so I don't even buy into that of him being below average there. I just think that the opportunities and sample size is far smaller than it is with him playing on the perimeter or as in the high-low game as a recipient of high-low passes or the passer of those. he's the real deal, man. He's unbelievable. His defense is Evan Mobley-esque, and now we're seeing what Mobley's doing in the NBA. And he's coming into the year, he was regarded as a better prospect than Evan Mobley was at USC and after his USC season.
Yeah, I mean, Evan Mobley is the top prospect in high school. I think people forget for the longest time he was number one, pretty much until Cade really emerged. Evan Mobley is the top prospect. They're like, I mean, I personally had never seen a 17-year-old leave his feet and come back quicker than he did with such a high vertical. I mean, just so quick off the ground. Chet really is almost a more, even, sounds silly to say, but even more well-rounded player where, I mean, he brings the ball up the floor and has smoother handles than Mobley. It's absolutely ridiculous. But this is Locked On Chet, and this is the conclusion of Locked On Chet. You can be assured that this will be a common thing, especially come postseason. I mean, looking at what Evan Mobley did in the postseason last year in March Madness, I assure you we'll be talking a lot about Evan. Got carried away there with Chet Holmgren and just how dominant he will be in the NCAA tournament. This isn't just a West Coast Conference thing. We've seen him dominate plenty of high major teams. I mean, we saw him, I would say, dominate the teams like Duke. In some ways, it wasn't always, 2010 5-5-5 or anything, but I mean, he was putting up plays and numbers where they just had to get it. Everybody had to get out of his way. He was putting up 3-4 blocks in almost every single high major game he played. But when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the upcoming games and what to look forward to in this week's matchups, as we always do. But maybe we can help you also bet on some of these upcoming games, because BetOnline has you covered. Football season is over. The Super Bowl was this weekend. Crazy game. But basketball is now in full steam for both pro and college basketball, as you know, listening to this podcast. From all the latest odds, totals, players, performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net, formerly .ag, is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC, and right to the Olympics coverage and information. Head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, Built Bar, which if you haven't had a Built Bar, Leif, I know you're new to the show. I don't know if they've sent you your Built Bar package. The day you do, we're gonna have a full segment just about how good those things are. And this is not just an ad. They're genuinely incredible Built Bars. It's the time of the year where pretty much, I've given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but this year's a little bit different. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, and Built Bar is a big part of that. They're nutritional bars, have tons of good flavors, and it makes me feel very, very good about eating healthy. They have so many good flavors, and best of all, they're only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And if you compare that to a candy bar, which usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs, it hits almost your daily limit right away. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and get your 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com to have the best tasting protein bars on the market. So back with Leif Tuin to preview this week in college basketball. Let's pick a handful of games and talk about what they mean for either the college landscape or the draft landscape. Leif, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Let's start with a game that's happening tonight. Villanova and Providence. Providence is an unlikely story. They're 20-2. They're freshly into the top 10. Villanova is the ultimate litmus test in the Big East and have been for the past few years. I'm very curious to see what exactly they're made of. Ed Cooley is my front runner for Coach of the Year right now, and I think that this team is extremely tough, and Villanova is a little banged up right now. This could be a huge win and help Providence get a leg up in the Big East, which no one saw coming. I mean, we did a Big East preview, and neither of us mentioned Providence at all. So shame on us and good on Ed Cooley. That's the one I'll be watching today.
Yeah, that'll be a good game. I love Nate Watson, and I really hope that gets him on some pro radars, whether it's NBA or overseas or G League. He deserves it. He's a really fun center. I'll stick with Tuesday today. You've got Wake Forest at Duke. We talked a lot about AJ Griffin. I think you're going to see a really strong draft matchup and a heavy offensive-minded player, Alondis Williams, at Wake Forest. And I would be very shocked to see anybody but AJ Griffin lining up against him that'll be a really good test for both players. I think mostly Alondas has more risk involved in this, if you want to call it that. I wouldn't hold it over his head if he scores 10 points on like 15 shots. It's a tough matchup, but I'm really excited to see that. What's your next one, Leif?
I got one more from today. Kentucky and Tennessee. Kentucky has kind of cracked most prognosticators' one line. And that's a team that's really trending in the right direction. Ty Washington had another leg injury in his last game. See if he's all right. But Tennessee is a team that's in the top 10 of the net. And that's something that means that analytically they're playing very well, even if it's not necessarily showing up yet in the wins. And typically what happens if that's the case is they eventually do come. And this could be a huge marker for Rick Barnes and the Tennessee Volunteers. They've got a lot of talent. They're a veteran group. I think Kentucky will probably still win this game, but if Tennessee wins this, watch out for the Volunteers hopping into the top 10, top 12 in the country.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. For my next one, I'm going to go with Mississippi State, someone who I feel like has really risen over the last month. They're a super efficient guard, and that is Iverson Molinar. In his first matchup against Alabama, he had 24 points, 4 assists, 6 rebounds on 8 of 17 shooting. It was, I want to say, the only time in the last month he shot under 50% from the field. I could be wrong. It was one of 3. It was one of 3 times. The other 2 times for 39%. And that was that was 3 of 13 games he shot under 50%, which is an absurd stat. Also in that game, Keon Ellis did a really good job. He's one of the better low-key 3-and-D guys in the class. He had 14 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, and that was on 30% shooting, unfortunately, but got to the line and hit threes. I think that'll be a really fun matchup. You know, Iverson Molinar, JD Davison, 2 guys that are around the same range, in the 40 range, I would say. Leif, who you got? Yeah, looks like you got what? 2 more? Let's say 2 more. We'll do 2 or 3.
Yeah, I got one more, and that's I think this is the most obvious one of the week is Texas Tech and Baylor. To me, this is not for supremacy of the Big 12 because Kansas is up in that, but I think this is a battle for a 2 seed in the tournament. The winner of this game, assuming they play out well, I think Texas Tech beat Baylor the first time, and I think they're coming to Lubbock in this one. If Baylor is able to win this game, I think they get the 2 seed over Texas Tech. If Texas Tech wins this, I think they get a 2 seed and Baylor moves down to a 3, especially considering that they still got Kansas a second time, and Jonathan Tchamwa, one of our favorite guys, is out. He tore his ACL, out for the year. This is a big test for some prospects. I think we'll see extra Jeremy Sohan and more Kendall Brown, but also I think that in a college basketball purist world, without draft being there, I think this is a huge seeding game because whoever wins this game is going to have an upper hand in the Big 12 and I think in bracketology.
Yeah, the Big 12 is an absolute bloodbath. Let's just set that straight. I don't think there's any team that really is dominant over everybody else as good as Baylor has been, Texas Tech has been, Kansas has been. None of them are the clear alpha, and there's only one team at the bottom, and even then they might be the best and worst team in any Power 5 conference in Oklahoma State. For my next one, I'm looking forward to next Monday, right before we record again, so I'm counting that in that window. Indiana, Ohio State. I think that's going to be a good one because I'm just looking at this not only from a college perspective. I think that is a very big matchup. But you look at EJ Liddell, someone who I think is starting to climb on draft boards. I'm still holding some stock down low, but him versus Trace Jackson Davis, one of the players who is weird because we talked about him. If he had a jump shot, he's a consensus top 30 prospect. But without that jump shot, he's fringe draftable. I'm really interested to see that matchup. Both are very good on the defensive end, I would say, and I'm very interested to see that matchup. You got one more to bring us home?
Yeah, I got one more, and I think this is one that is interesting on both draft and just college basketball fandom. I would say that Michigan State and Illinois is a big matchup in the Big Ten, kind of trying to stay alive, hope to upset Purdue in terms of who's reigning supreme. They got some help from Michigan this past week. And I think Max Christie has had a few games in a row that haven't been up to his standard. We talked about him. He's a guy who was kind of borderline on my top shooters. He could have a big game. I think that there's some older players in Michigan State that need one of those signature wins that they win by themselves, not with Cassius Winston, not with Xavier Tillman. And as for Illinois, Kofi Coburn's been a monster. He's been a monster. He's made himself draftable. And I think that Trent Frazier, I don't think he's quite draftable because he's a 5th-year senior, but he's shooting really well, and he's one of the best defenders, if not the best defender in the Big Ten. He's making a case for himself to be a second-round pick and also an all Big Ten selection. So that's a game I've got my eyes on Saturday.
Man, I love everything you just said about that, especially the part with Max Christie being almost in the top. I mean, he's one of my top picks for the Mavs, so very much appreciated. Well, this has been a good episode, Leif. I think this is actually one of our more fun ones. We went full locked on Chet. We did our top shooters, and we previewed, what was coming up in this next week. As March Madness approaches, I mean, we're a month away from Selection Sunday. We are right around the corner. Tell your friends, subscribe, like YouTube. We are brand new on there. If you're still listening on the audio platform, thank you. We have not forgotten about you. We are just making a big YouTube push, but thank you for making us your first listen every day. Thank you for keeping us in your lives. Hopefully we do a good job. Tell us anything we can do better on. Always open to criticism and feedback. Just don't, personally attack us is all I ask. Don't roast me as much as I do love a good roast. But you can find us at Mavs Draft, as it says on YouTube, and at Leif2Lean. Thank you, and we will be back next Tuesday.